with my soul. It is well, it is well, my soul. It is well, it is well, my soul.
There was a guy named Horatio Spafford. He was a very wealthy lawyer in the late 1800s, and he lived and he practiced law in Chicago. And he was actually living his dream. I mean, he had it all, right? He had a beautiful wife. He had 5 amazing kids, and he had this huge portfolio of investments and properties all throughout Chicagoland. And then one day, one of his 5 kids, actually the only boy of the 5, became sick. And sadly, the little boy couldn't overcome the fever, and he passed. And so this wealthy lawyer, he lost his only son. And with the family reeling from the loss of their son in 1871, many of you know the Great Chicago Fire came through downtown Chicago, and it destroyed most of downtown Chicago. And with it, this wealthy lawyer lost most of his properties and investment. And really, literally overnight, he lost it all. It was all gone. So the family's devastated, they're grieving, and he decides that they just need to get away from it all. They just need an escape. And so he puts his wife and his 4 daughters, the 4 remaining kids, on a ship, and he's going to send them to Europe for just a much-needed vacation. And he's going to stay in Chicago for a few weeks, tie up some loose ends, some business dealings, and then he's going to join them in Europe for just a time away. They just need to escape. They just need to recoup and to grieve. And so the wife and the 4 daughters, they get on a ship. They head toward Europe. And as they're going toward Europe, the ship that they're on collides with another ship. And the 4 daughters are killed. And so his wife makes it to Europe, and she sends back a message to Chicago where he is. And she says, "Our 4 daughters have perished. I alone have survived." He decides to get on a ship to go and comfort his grieving wife. And so he gets on a ship and he heads toward Europe. And he gets to the place, this general area where the collision happened that took the lives of his precious 4 daughters. And the story goes that he went to his stateroom and he began to write down some words, a poem, lyrics. And this is what he wrote. He said, "When peace like a river attendeth my way." He's like, hey, there's times in life when things just go well. That there's no pain, there's no problems, there's nothing, everything is smooth. It's like a river, right? A river that just flows and it's just at peace. If you've ever been by a mountain stream, it's just like there's just peace that just flows. And sometimes life is like that. He says, when peace like a river attendeth my way, when life is just good and smooth. And then he said this, he said, when sorrows like sea billows roll. And he says that when the waves of disappointment and loss and fear, he says, when waves like sea billows just roll in, when you feel like you're being bombarded, have you ever stood like in the shallow end of the ocean and the waves just keep crashing over you and crashing over you? He's like, sometimes life feels like that. The waves just bombard you and you're just being pounded by the waves over and over and over again. When sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, what Spafford is saying here is he's saying, hey, whatever the circumstances, whatever happens, whatever comes my way, whatever the lot, God has taught me to say, and then he penned this, it is well with my soul. And what this wealthy lawyer, this heartbroken father, what he was saying is, he said, whatever happens, no matter what happens, he says, I've learned, God has taught me that it's okay. It's going to be okay. In fact, he uses the word well. He says, it is well. And he says, it's well not just on the surface, at a surface level where I can smile. No, he says, it is well in my soul. Like down deep in my soul. He says, in the depths of me, to the core of my being, it is well with my soul. Now, this was a classic hymn that was written in the late 1800s, and it's been sung and recited millions of times all around the world. You've probably, even if you're not a church person, you've probably heard it, maybe even sung it before. And we're in this conversation we're calling It Happens. Right? And unless you live with your head buried in the sand somewhere, right? Life happens. And life happens to you, and life happens to me. And this brings up one of the deepest, most personal, most common questions that all of us ask. We ask this if you're a follower of Jesus, and maybe you've been following Jesus for years, maybe even decades. If this is your first time setting foot in Miami Church, you ask this question. If you're just seeking, like, what is all of this church and Bible and Jesus? What is all? If you're just seeking, we all ask this question. And here's the question. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen to good people? I mean, it happens, right? And it happens to really good people. And sometimes it seems that people that are not so good, they seem to get off easy. That somehow their life, they seem to escape some of the harshest parts of life. Why? I mean, why do bad things happen to good people? I mean, why is there a family in our church who's dead, who's young, a vibrant man, a beautiful man, a very loving father, a loving grandfather? Why is it that he gets sick and he dies? Why? Why? Why is it that one of our key volunteers at our church, she works at the Cancer Institute at Baptist down on Southwest 88th. She works with kids. Is there anything worse? Is there anything sadder? Is there anything worse than a kid without any hair, with a shaved head, that's got cancer riddled in their body? Tragic accidents. Good people, right? Working hard, trying to do the right thing. Just can't catch a break. You ever said that? I just can't catch a break. And the reality is all of us have been touched by this or affected by this or experienced it. Why do bad things happen to good people? I mean, if there really is this loving and gracious God, I mean, if there really is this all-powerful God, then why would He allow pain and suffering? Why would He allow us to grieve? Why would He allow us to feel so much despair? I mean, why? In fact, this is the number one reason that people walk away from Jesus or God or church, walk away from their faith. Maybe this is you today. Maybe you had a strong faith, a vibrant faith at some point, but something happened, right? And it causes us to walk away or to go a different direction. Maybe you're even struggling with this now. Why? You know, there's an old story. In fact, it's one of the oldest stories that's ever recorded in history about a guy named Job. And Job is a good man. In fact, the writer of the story insists that Job is the greatest man in his part of the world, that there's no one greater. And not only is Job a great man and a good man, but Job is also a very wealthy man. And in this time in history, he had a lot of land, he had crops, he had animals, he had servants, and in fact, he had a house full of kids. But the story, as the writer tells us, the story for Job, it all falls apart. Everything falls apart. And much of his wealth is stolen. His possessions and everything are consumed by this fire. And then in a tragic accident, his kids are all killed. If that's not more agony than one person can bear, he develops these sores all over his body, and he just is covered in sores. And in fact, we find Job, he's literally sitting in ashes, and he has a broken piece of pottery, and he's scraping his skin just to try to find some relief from the pain. And his wife comes up to him, and he says, Job, why are you holding on to your integrity? Why don't you just curse God and die? And Job had these friends, and these friends would come. And they would sit around as he's sitting there in his misery, scraping his skin, and they would come around and they would discuss what's happening, right? And his friends had all these opinions. So like, let me tell you why, Job, this is happening to you. And they would tell him, and they took their turns. They gave Job answers and explanations. I mean, is that what we want when we suffer? When we're in pain, is that what we want? Do we want answers and explanations? Like, do we want to know why? Like, why does bad thing happen to good people? Why does bad things happen to me? I mean, is it just fate or chance or luck? Is it some kind of divine cosmic judgment or punishment? I mean, does God even notice? I mean, does God even care? Is he even paying attention to what's happening with me? And so Job's friends, these friends, they give their answers and their explanations. And Job defends himself. And then these friends, right, they give their opinions. And Job comes back with his perspective on why things are happening. And so they debate and they discuss and they have all of these conversations. And then in the end, when everybody's had a chance to speak, God actually speaks. And when God speaks out of a whirlwind. And when God speaks, we actually find that God has questions for Job. And God says to Job, Job, why do you talk without knowing what you're talking about? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you and you will answer me. He says, Job, where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Like, tell me if you understand. I mean, who marked off the dimensions of the earth? I mean, surely you know, Job. Who stretched a measuring line across it? What were its footing set? Who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and the angels shouted for joy? God says to Job, Job, who shut up the sea behind the doors? When it burst forth from the womb? When I made the cloud its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness? When I fixed limits for it and set doors and bars in place? Hey, when I said to the ocean, this far you may come and no further, here is where your proud waves halt. Hey, Job, have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place? That it might take the earth by its edges and shake the wicked out of it. The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its features stand out like those of a garment. The wicked are denied their light. Their upraised arm is broken. Job, have you journeyed to the shadows of the deep? Have you walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of the deepest darkness? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? I mean, tell me. Job, what's the way to the abode of light? And where does darkness reside? Can you take me to that place? Do you know the path to the dwelling? Surely you know, for you were already born. You've lived so many years. Job, have you entered the storehouses of the snow? Have you seen the storehouses of the hell, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle? I mean, what is the place where the lightning is stored? Where's the place that the east winds are scattered over the earth? I mean, Job, who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain or a path for the thunderstorm? To water the land where no one lives, an uninhabited place to satisfy a desolate wasteland, and to make it sprout with grass. Job, does the rain have a father? Who fathers the drops of dew? From whose womb comes forth ice? Who gives birth to the frost from the heavens when the waters become hard as stone and the surface of the deep is frozen? Can you bind the chains of Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons, or let out the bear with its cubs? Job, do you know the laws of heaven? Can you set up God's dominion over the earth? Can you raise your voice to the clouds and cover yourself with a flood of water? I mean, do you send the lightning bolts on their way? Do they report to you? Do they say, here we are? Job, who gives the heart wisdom and understanding to the mind? I I mean, who has the wisdom to count the clouds? Who can tip over the water jars of the heavens? When the dust becomes hard and the clods of earth stick together, do you hunt the prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of lions when they crouch in their dens and lie in wait in the thicket? I mean, who provides food for the raven when its young cry out to God and wander about for lack of food? Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you watch when the doe bears her fawn? Do you count the months till they bear? Do you know the time they give birth? They crouch and bring forth their young. Their labor pains are ended. Their young thrive and grow strong in the wilds. They leave and they do not return. Who let the donkey go free? Who untied its ropes? I gave it a wasteland for its home, the salt flats for its inhabitant. It laughs at the commotion in town. It does not hear the driver shout. It rages the hills for a pasture, searching for any green thing. Job, will the wild ox consent to serve you? Will it stay by your manger at night? Can you hold it to the furrow with a harness? Will it till the valleys behind you? Will you rely on it for great strength? Will you leave your heavy work to it? Can you trust it to haul your grain and bring it to the threshing floor? Job, the wings of the ostrich flap joyfully, though they cannot compare with the wings and the feathers of a stork. She lays her eggs on the ground and lets them warm in the sand, unmindful that a foot may crush them, that some wild animal may trample them. She treats her young harshly as if they were not hers. She cares not that her labor was in vain. For God did not endow her with wisdom or give her a share of good sense. When she spreads her feathers to rung, she laughs at horse and rider. Job, do you give the mighty horse its strength, or clothe its neck with the flowing mane? Do you make it leap like locusts, striking terror with the proud snorting? The horse, it paws fiercely, rejoicing in its strength. The horse charges into the fray. It laughs at fear, afraid of nothing. It does not shy away from the sword. The quiver rattles against its side, along with the flashing spear and the lance. In frenzied excitement, the horse eats up the ground. It cannot stand still when the trumpet sounds. At the blast of the trumpet, it shouts, "Aha!" It catches the scent of the battle from afar, the shouts of the commander in the battle cry. Job, does the hawk take flight by your wisdom? Does it spread its wings toward the south? Does the eagle soar at your command and build its nest on high? The eagle dwells on a cliff and it stays there at night. A rocky crag is its stronghold. From there it looks for food, Job. It detects afar. Its young one feasts on blood, and where the slain are, there he is. And then God said to Job, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him. And then Job answered God. Job said, I'm unworthy. How can I reply to you? Job said, I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, and I will say no more. We want answers, don't we? We want to know why. We want explanations. Somebody please explain this to me. And there are times when the only healthy, honest human thing to do is to shake our fist in rage and to shout our questions at the heavens, demanding an answer and an explanation. But true wisdom, the kind we find here with Job, the kind that endures, the kind that sustains through pain and suffering, that kind of wisdom knows when to speak and when to stay silent. Because your story's not over. The last chapter has not been written, and there is far more going on here than you can even know. And my prayer for you and prayer for me today is that you will find freedom from always having to know why everything happens. I pray that God will open your heart, and that God will open your mind to all sorts of new perspectives. And mostly, I pray that you'll have wisdom to know when to say, I spoke once, I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. May I say a word of prayer over you? Abba, Heavenly Father, I don't know. I don't always get it. I don't understand. But I know there is way more going on here than I can see. And I know there is way more going on here than I can know. And I know there is way more going on here than I can understand. And so, God, would you give us freedom from always having to understand why everything happens the way it does? God, would you open our hearts and our minds to new perspectives, your perspective? And would you give us wisdom that we may know when to speak, when we should shake our fist and shout our questions, God, and when we should be like Job and be silent. God, I spoke once. I have no answer. Twice, and I will say no more.